GPS data obtained by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources shows the boat arriving at the island at 11:14 in the morning. Friends Wells was with told investigators he chose to stay behind on the island. Judge Ashley Cole says her son was on the boat. In a Facebook post, she said the boat had an issue and somebody made a call for help.
We're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking.
Wells's mother reported him missing later that night.
Please report her 18-year-old son, Nolan Wells, missing last seen at 3 on Horn Island.
After a 2-day search, his body washed up on the island.
Every mystery reaches a moment when the story people believe begins to fall apart. The Nolan Wells case may have just reached that moment. The girl everyone wanted to hear from has finally spoken. A grand jury has officially been called, and GPS tracking has revealed a timeline that refuses to fit the version many people accepted. The deeper you look, the harder it becomes to ignore the questions that still don't have answers. Tonight, we're breaking down every major update and showing how they connect. At 4:31 p.m. on July 4th, a boat pulled away from Horn Island without Nolan Wells on it. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources had tracked that vessel across the Gulf Coast waters, recording every coordinate, every stop, every hour. But there is one thing GPS data cannot track: the truth. Because according to the last person who spoke with Nolan Wells, he was planning to rejoin his friends and get back on that boat before it left. According to the friends who drove it away, Nolan told them the exact opposite. Both accounts come from people who were there. Both describe his final words, and both cannot be accurate. One of them is wrong. And somewhere behind that single contradiction sits a family who has spent every day since trying to understand which version of their son's last decision is real. If you are following this case, hit like and subscribe to Crime Dive Network now, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. The family is still hoping the right person sees this. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He had just graduated from Ocean Springs High School and was preparing for his sophomore year as a football player at Southwest Mississippi Community College. Coaches described him as humble, respectful, hard-working. He was a good swimmer, and on the morning of July 4th, he left for what should have been a holiday trip to Horn Island, a barrier island 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, accessible only by private boat. He never came back. For 2 weeks after his disappearance, one name carried more weight than almost anything else in the case, precisely because so little was known about the person attached to it: Katie. The young woman Nolan's friends said he had spoken with on the beach. While early coverage focused on the search, the online speculation, and the grief of a family waiting for answers, Katie remained almost entirely out of public view. Her identity was not in the first wave of statements. Her account had not been shared. And while strangers debated theories and chased unrelated rumors across social media, the one person who may have spoken with Nolan last sat unidentified, unaware that her name would eventually matter this much to people she had never met. The reason traces back to the very first night he went missing. According to someone who was on the phone with Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, as she tried to locate her son, Katie's name entered the conversation almost by accident, mentioned as someone Nolan had wanted to stay behind with. And then came a detail that made an already terrifying night considerably worse. Word that Katie herself might be missing too. Nobody on that call could say who she actually was or where to begin looking. A mother already searching for one missing child was suddenly told there might be two. No name to attach to the second worry. No number to call. Just more fear stacked on top of fear that already had nowhere left to go. That particular fear turned out to be unfounded. Katie was never missing. She had left the island safely that day on a different boat, and had been reachable the entire time. Confirmation came, not from police, and not from Nolan's friends, but from her own mother, Gracie Mack Cormack, who posted publicly to correct the record once speculation about her daughter started spreading online. According to Mack Cormack, Her daughter was on Horn Island that day, spent time with Nolan, and the two parted ways sometime that afternoon. She says her daughter has no knowledge of anything that happened to him afterward. She said goodbye. She got on a different boat. She went home to a mother who had no idea her daughter's name would soon sit at the center of one of the most talked-about cases in the country. If that were the whole story, it would have ended there quietly. The way most footnotes in larger tragedies tend to end, it does not. Because attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, says Katie's account of that final conversation is specific and has not wavered, and it conflicts directly with what Nolan's friends have told investigators. According to Katie, Nolan told her he was planning to rejoin his friends and get back on their boat before they left the island. According to the friends themselves, Nolan told them the opposite, that he intended to stay behind on the island with Katie entirely by his own choice, in his own words. This is not a theory pulled from a comment section. It is a direct contradiction between two accounts describing the same young man's last documented words in two ways that cannot be reconciled. If Katie's version holds up, then something happened in the space between Nolan stating his intention to leave and the boat actually pulling away without him. Something interrupted whatever plan he had. Nobody has explained what. If the friend's version holds up, then Nolan made a deliberate, conscious choice to remain alone on a remote barrier island as his only ride home departed without him, which raises an entirely different question about what happened to him in the hours that followed, alone, without the group he had spent the entire day with. Nolan's parents are left holding two versions of their son's final choice, unable to know which one is real. There is a particular kind of pain in that specific uncertainty, one that is different from grief itself. Grief is the loss of a person you loved, but this is the loss of even knowing your own son's last decision. Did he choose to stay, or did he intend to come home? For most families, that would be an easy thing to answer, pieced together from a dozen small confirmations that never even register as important until they are needed. For the Wansley family, it has become the single hardest unanswered question in their son's entire case. And it is not the only one. The official police report lists Nolan as wearing black shorts at the time of his disappearance. But according to Christine Wansley, a young woman who was on the island that day later reached out and shared photos showing Nolan in blue shorts, not black. On its own, it sounds like nothing. A clerical slip, a misremembered detail. But for a mother who no longer has the ability to simply ask her son what he was wearing, that detail is not a footnote to move past. It is a thread. And once you begin pulling on one thread in a case built almost entirely on other people's memories, you cannot help but look for the next one. Then there is what happened before Nolan's body was even found. While his parents were still holding on to hope, still half expecting a phone call that would end the nightmare with relief instead of grief, they went to retrieve his car from a friend's driveway. According to the family, the friend came to the door, claiming he could not find the keys. He went back inside to check again. Minutes passed. The kind of minutes that feel endless when you are standing on someone else's porch, waiting with your missing son somewhere out there and no way to reach him. Eventually, the keys turned up exactly where another person overheard on a phone call had mentioned they were the entire time, sitting on top of an Xbox inside the house. For a family already desperate for anything resembling a straight answer, a delay like that became one more detail that did not behave the way they expected. And then there is Nolan's phone. According to a family friend who helped track the device, Nolan posted to Snapchat almost every day, the kind of habit so consistent it barely registered as a habit at all until it stopped. In the 24 hours before he disappeared, that activity went completely silent. No updates, no posts. A silence that everyone close to him agrees was simply not like him. When the device was finally located, one more inconsistency surfaced. The location tied to the account did not match the place where the phone itself was ultimately found. Nolan's digital life had been by every account an open book. And then, for exactly the window of time that matters most, it went quiet. Not gradually, not with warning. Just silence. In the one 24-hour stretch his family would give almost anything to understand. None of these details, taken individually, tell us exactly what happened to Nolan Wells. But together they are the reason this family says they cannot simply accept the official account as complete. They are the reason an independent autopsy was conducted. They are the reason a grand jury has now been officially called. And they are the reason two parents continue to ask questions nobody has fully answered yet. Even as they prepare to say goodbye to a son, they are not convinced they fully understand. At 4:31 p.m. on July 4th, a boat pulled away from Horn Island without Nolan Wells on it. That much had been established. What had not been established until the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released its tracked coordinates was what that vessel did next. Because the GPS record shows something far more complex than a single trip home. It shows 4 separate movements across water and land, spanning more than 70 miles, recorded automatically without anyone's input, permission, or intervention. A sequence of stops and starts that raises the same question from every angle. Why would a boat that had just left an 18-year-old alone on a remote barrier island need to keep moving for hours afterward? If you are following this case, hit like and subscribe to Crime Dive Network now, and tell us in the comments which unanswered question is keeping you up at night, because the family is still waiting for someone to answer it. Nolan's homegoing celebration was held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, the same community that watched him grow up, play football, and become the young man his coaches described with such consistency. A place that once celebrated his signing day now had to prepare to lay him to rest. And underneath every headline and every piece of tracked data, this remains fundamentally a family grieving a son in front of an audience of millions they never asked for. They do not get to walk away from this story once it stops trending. They live inside it permanently. And the only thing anyone watching can really offer them is care in how their son's story gets told. What follows is not based on anyone's memory, or anyone's account, or anyone's version of events. It is based entirely on tracked data. The one part of this story that cannot be shaped by grief or loyalty or fear. At 9:56 a.m. on July 4th, the boat carrying Nolan and his friends left its dock. By 11:14, it had reached Horn Island. For several hours the group stayed together, celebrating the holiday the way so many others were doing that same afternoon along that same stretch of coast. At 4:31 p.m., according to the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat left Horn Island. Nolan was not on board. It returned to its original dock, and then rather than staying there, it kept moving. At 5:52 p.m., the boat traveled into Fort Bayou. By 6:06, it was back at the dock once again. Later that night at 7:19 p.m., the boat's tracked position shifted to the Fort Bayou boat launch. From there, according to the Marine Resources report, it was taken out of the water entirely and moved over land, presumably towed by a vehicle, to a residence in Biloxi owned by the boat's owners. 4 separate movements, recorded automatically after the moment Nolan was left behind. Not one simple trip home, but a series of stops across several hours, ending on land more than 70 miles from where the day began. That sequence is the exact window investigators are still working to fully explain, and the exact window Nolan's parents replay in their minds, searching for what might have happened inside it. On July 15th, Nolan's parents sat down face-to-face with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers, Mac Ilrath, their first direct meeting with her office since Nolan's body was found. Attorney Ben Crump described the meeting as respectful and candid, a small but meaningful shift after more than a week of feeling like they were on the outside of their own son's case. Out of that meeting came confirmation that once the DA's investigation wraps up, its findings will go to a grand jury. That phrase tends to carry more emotional weight than it actually holds, so it is worth being precise. A grand jury referral is not a verdict. It is not a formal accusation against any one person. It does not mean charges have already been filed, and it does not mean investigators have concluded a crime took place. What it means specifically is that the case has reached a procedural point where its findings will be formally reviewed to determine whether charges are warranted at all. It is a mechanism, a process, movement, but not resolution. And this family knows better than anyone the difference between those two words. Crump also used the moment to correct something that had spread widely online, the claim that the FBI had effectively taken over this investigation. According to an official statement from FBI Jackson, the Bureau has assisted Jackson County investigators with specific elements of the case, largely centered on threats made against individuals connected to the investigation, threats that crossed state lines and therefore fell under federal jurisdiction. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office remains the lead agency. The FBI's involvement has been support, not command. Then there is Nolan's phone, the piece of evidence his family has pointed to from nearly the very beginning as something that might hold real answers about his final hours. A device small enough to fit in a pocket, ordinary in every way, now sitting at the center of a grand jury referral, an FBI-assisted threat investigation, and a mother's last hope for understanding her son's final hours. That is an extraordinary amount of weight to place on something so small. But for a family with almost nothing else left to hold on to, it has become one of the only tangible things they have. At the July 15th press conference, both sides agreed to something new, a joint inspection with experts representing the family working alongside experts connected to the official investigation, examining the device together rather than separately, comparing findings in real time instead of releasing competing statements after the fact. Attorney Eric Hertz is leading that effort on the family's side, working with former law enforcement professionals brought in specifically for the technical work involved. As of now, that inspection has not yet taken place. The family is still waiting, the way they have been waiting in one form or another since the night. Their son did not come home, waiting on a search, waiting on a coroner, waiting on an autopsy, waiting on a meeting with the district attorney, and now waiting on a phone. Each piece of this case has arrived slowly on its own timeline, and each time this family has had no choice but to wait for it. Before this closes, two pieces of this case deserve a direct correction because both spread widely, and both shaped what people believed about Nolan's death long before anyone checked whether they were true. The first involved a photograph. An image of Nolan at a pool party began circulating online after his body was found, and for a short, disorienting period, a significant number of people genuinely believed it proved he had been alive after July 4th. Hope that a grieving family had to watch spread, knowing it was not true, and having to say so publicly again and again. It was not true. Rolling Stone confirmed through image metadata and an account from his friend Tristan Shepard that the photo had actually been taken on June 27th, a full week before Nolan ever went to Horn Island. It had simply been uploaded online on July 5th, which caused the confusion about its timing. The second involved a video. Many believed it captured Nolan in an argument shortly before he vanished. Shepard addressed that directly as well. The voice on the recording was his own, not Nolan's. Both pieces of misinformation have since been corrected publicly and clearly. What is left, once you strip them away, is what was always underneath from the very beginning. The timeline. The unresolved contradiction between two first-hand accounts, and a family still waiting patiently and publicly for someone to give them real answers instead of theories. This case is still open. It remains in every sense unfinished. The grand jury has not concluded anything yet. The phone inspection agreed 2 weeks ago still has not happened. And the contradiction between Katie's account and the account given by Nolan's friends still has not been resolved by anyone with the actual authority to resolve it. Somewhere in Ocean Springs, a mother is planning a service for a son she still does not fully understand losing. A father is still replaying a driveway, a set of missing keys, a phone call he overheard. And a young woman named Katie, who never asked to become part of a national story, is living with the knowledge that her final conversation with Nolan Wells has become one of the most scrutinized exchanges in the country. Even though, by every account, she has done nothing but tell investigators what she remembers. That is the part of this story that is easy to lose underneath the grand jury language and the GPS timestamps and the legal terminology. Underneath all of it, there is still just a family in a small Mississippi community trying to understand how a holiday boat trip with friends ended with their son gone. Nothing about a grand jury referral changes that. Nothing about a joint phone inspection changes that. Those are steps, important ones, but they are steps toward an answer this family has not received yet. If this case matters to you, share this video with someone who's been following the story and subscribe to Crime Dive Network with notifications on so you do not miss the next confirmed update. Because somewhere in Mississippi, a family is still waiting for the truth about that night, and they deserve to have it told right.